Keelan Siobhan Clark, and today I have with me Dr. Douglas Graham. He is a raw food enthusiast, lifetime athlete, and later in life dad. And I can't wait to explore his very, very colorful resume and life to date. So, Dr. Graham, thank you so much for being here. Welcome.
Well, thank you so much. It's a treat to be on your show.
Yeah, it's a treat to have you. Speaking of treats, I want to talk to you first about how you got into the raw food movement, because I think you're probably one of the, forerunners in that lifestyle. So I'm going to give you credit for that. And I'd love for you to talk about, how you came to the decision to live that lifestyle, especially in a time where meat and potatoes were, standard issue, right?
Absolutely. It's a pretty straightforward story. Got a couple hours? No, it's a pretty straightforward story. I was very interested in nutrition. I studied nutrition when I was in grammar school with Mr. Asbell, my health teacher. He told us to eat fruits and vegetables. And Joe Rosati, my health teacher in high school, he told me, eat fruits and vegetables, they're really good for you. And when I went to college, I studied physical education and health and took every health course they offered and every nutrition course offered. And they said fruits and vegetables are like the best for you. And you got to eat lots of fruits and vegetables. And I even remember in fourth grade, a sign on the nurse's door that said an apple a day keeps the doctor away. It had some relationship to health and apples. And so in theory, I knew fruits and vegetables were good for us. And by the time I was finishing college, realizing like, wow, if I actually did what people said, I'd be eating more fruits and vegetables because that's what everybody's saying. So I wondered and did some math and science and nutrition stuff,
Yeah.
And came to the conclusion that actually it was a lot of fruits and vegetables. You had to eat a lot of fruits and vegetables. And I started wondering, like, if I was walking around a million years ago and there was berries on some bush and a saber-toothed tiger. I know there were no saber-toothed tigers at that point in time, but if there was like woolly mammoths or something, and I'm wondering like, wow, would I really go chase after some dangerous animal or would I just pick some berries? And I'm thinking I'd probably just pick some berries. All the more research I did and the more study I did says early man ate fruits and vegetables and studies of their teeth and stuff, and it's all there. The more I studied the science, it just kept pushing me. So I went kicking and screaming, and I became like a macro kind of guy, and then a vegetarian, and eventually a vegan. And
what do you mean by macro? Can you explain what
macro is well, even before macro, there was what they called the ortho, and the ortho diet relies on supplementation a lot. That's what orthomolecular medicine is all about, using supplementation to get your nutrition right. And I learned about that stuff, but then macro is well, the whole macrobiotic movement. I'm not going to try to sum that up in a few words, but essentially you're relying heavily on complex carbohydrates, basically 3 or 4 times a day, eating heavy starchy meals, and because they're starchy and starch has no taste, according to the dictionary, you salt it to give it some flavor. So it's a salty, starchy life. And you see, you rice and beans and oats and nothing necessarily like I'm saying anything bad about it, but that was the kickoff. And I'm looking at that and going, where's the fruits and vegetables?
Right.
So I went back to more fruits and vegetables, and eventually the vegetarian thing struck me, and I tried that. And I was willing to try changes. I grew up in a household where dietary experimentation was quite normal.
Okay.
My mom was heavy and she wanted to try different things, and we all tried it. If she tried it, we tried it. And so I wasn't particularly scared of doing an experiment. I mean, it's just an experiment, right? If it works, you work it some more, and if it doesn't work, you go back and do something else. I was only vegan for a few months before somebody started talking to me about raw vegan, and I told him he was nuts. He had to be nuts. I mean, nobody's going to eat raw food in a
Well, why did
world.
you think he was nuts? Because when I think of vegan, I think of raw food at this point. So,
Well, I understand full well, and and when you think of raw food, you should think of 80-10-10 automatically. That's where I want to go, is when people think about raw food, they automatically think about 80-10-10,
what's 80-10-10?
which is a diet that is predominated by the consumption of fruit, where carbohydrates are the main source of calories, and fats and proteins are still included, but they're minimized to the point of what's recommended by the world's health authorities, where they say, you only need single digit fat consumption to get all your omegas and all the necessary fats. You only need single digit protein consumption to get all the protein you need. The rest is supposed to come from carbohydrates. And for me, that meant simple carbohydrates because they taste sweet. And I know I've got a sweet tooth. We all have sweet tooth.
Nature's
We had
candy.
milk teeth when we were little, and
Yeah.
then we developed we had an enzyme that allowed us to consume mother's milk, and then we stop producing that enzyme and we lose our milk teeth, and what grows in our secondary teeth, we call them sweet teeth. So, trying to control your sweet tooth is like saying I'm never going to pee again. I mean, it's not going to happen. Your sweet tooth is there for your benefit. So I just started eating a whole lot more fruit, and the more fruit I ate, but it was the weirdest thing going from vegan to raw vegan. I did it as an experiment for a month. I remember clearly. I did it as an experiment for a month. After 2 weeks, I said, I'm never going back. But then learning how to do it took some practice, because all I knew was cooked. I mean, I had a more than 2 decades of making my own cooked food, and I'm just like, learning how to. I could eat raw, but the trick was to stay happy and healthy.
Right.
And I wasn't always happy. I would be lured. Every time I got lured towards starchy food. Bread, rice, pasta, corn, potato, oatmeal. There's always bread, rice, pasta, corn, potato, oatmeal. Bread, rice, pasta, potato, oatmeal. It's always the same. I've talked to thousands of people who tried to,
I love it. I love
thousands of people
spaghetti.
try to go raw food, and they always end up eating bread, rice, pasta, potato, and I go, why? The answer why is because they weren't eating enough fruit. So they weren't getting enough carbohydrates. Their body said, you need more carbohydrates, go back to the bread. There are other reasons, like complex carbohydrates numb us. And a lot of people like to be numb because they don't want to feel their pain. And I mean, that's why we drink to forget, and we eat to forget. And and so going raw makes you have to deal with a whole lot of emotions get turned on. And I found out that even guys have emotions. And
What? That's
yeah, it's amazing. It was like a miracle of science, and it's not just me. So I went through all that stuff and took a few years of running strings. Oh, I got 3 months of raw. I got 6 months of raw. I got 9 months of raw. Finally, after I made like 9 months and then went back to starchy food, I go, I got to eat more fruit. And so I just started eating fruit for breakfast, fruit for lunch, all the fruit I want before my dinner meal, and then the biggest salad in the world. And in size, the amount of fruit I eat is equal to the amount of vegetables I eat, pretty much in size. But in terms of calories, almost all my calories come from fruit. It just works out spectacularly well. I've been happy and doing it ever since for, I don't know, 30-something years.
So I have one question. I have so many questions, but specifically because you're an athlete, I think it's important. And then we'll go to how you're feeding your daughter, because I think that's a really interesting.
That's the ticket, right? It was
Part
like
of
the incumbent responsibility that came on me and my wife, who of her own accord also went raw before I met her.
Okay. Yeah. So you're an athlete. And athletes are always trying to get to you're trying to elevate every time, right? So you're trying to get to, What's that?
You want to hit peak performances.
Exactly, right. So when you're falling off the wagon, quote unquote, the raw wagon, was it when you were in training, or would it have just been, like someone picking up, I used to be a smoker, so I'd fall off my non-smoking wagon, and there would be a trigger there. It was usually emotional.
Yeah, usually emotional. I would say I was always in training. I mean, I've always been in training. I don't take periods of time where I'm not training. But obviously there's some times where it's more intense than others, and the calorie need goes up a bit. And if I didn't match that, the next thing you know, you're just hungry. And
Right.
because for a long time I was a cardio athlete, meaning that I didn't want to be 1 ounce heavier than I had to be. So, I mean, I kept my body fat levels at about 3% and, was ripped all the time. And I'm not doing that at the moment, but different sport, different needs.
Right.
So, but
You found peak
there
performance
wasn't much
through your
room.
raw.
It's just that there wasn't that much room for error. If I wanted to keep that trim, and I started to undereat a little bit, there weren't that many warning signs before I'm like ravenous, and the more ravenous you get, the less discriminating you become
Right.
in just about every decision you make.
Yeah, definitely. Hangry is a real thing.
Sure.
So for, let's say, for the parents that are watching, I know that these days, a lot of times, um, buying produce can be expensive, or it's not great, it's not delicious, or it's a whole chore to go to the farmer's market where it's actually organic. What is your advice? Because you're in the UK. But what is your advice to easily, get those fresh vegetables?
Well, it